in a certain way with people around us usually eating animals, and I know I did, and I didn't really think very much about what I was eating, and I never really made a conscious choice to eat animal foods. It was just something that my parents were doing, my brothers and sisters were doing, everybody around me was doing it, and I just sort of adopted the practice as a habit because it was what everybody was doing. I thought it was normal and natural. And then, as we adopt these habits of eating animals, we start rationalizing it and telling ourselves we need to do it. We need the meat for the protein. We need the cow's milk for the calcium, things like that. But those are myths. We do not need meat for any nutritious reason. We do not need milk either. We can live very well on plant foods. And most citizens, I think, when they hear about what happens to produce meat, milk, and eggs, are really upset by it. They're appalled by it. And when they hear about factory farming especially, people are upset and they don't like it. And so, unfortunately, what they sometimes say is, don't tell me, I don't want to know. Because there's this dissonance between their natural empathy, and human beings, we have natural empathy. We are hardwired to feel something when we see somebody else hurt. We are connected to other humans and other animals, and when we see somebody hurt, it affects us. So when people are supporting this animal farming business and buying animal foods and don't like how the animals are mistreated and then ultimately violently killed, there's this don't look kind of approach. So a big part of our challenge is to encourage people to look and then ultimately to make choices that they can feel good about. And that would result in a huge shift away from eating animal foods towards eating more plant foods. And so today, you all are stepping up, speaking out for a more compassionate way. A lot of the people that you reached out to support your walk today, for them, this might have been kind of their first introduction to this whole idea that farm animals are mistreated and that there's actually a sanctuary where they can live out their lives and be seen as friends, not food. And so I would encourage you to stay in touch with people who sponsored you and who you reached out to about this event. And also reach out to other people. If you've taken any pictures here, put those on Facebook. One of the things we have today that we didn't have when Farm Sanctuary started back in the 1980s is enormous opportunity to reach people through social networks, through Facebook, through Twitter, through the internet. And this is allowing us to educate more and more people more efficiently and more quickly than ever. There's great videotapes also on YouTube, and some of those show the factory farming cruelty, which you can also show people. And so we have this ability now to reach people. And so there's more awareness about the cruelty of animal farming. There's also now more awareness about the benefits of plant-based eating. And so people are going vegetarian in many cases for health reasons. Bill Clinton is a very good example of that. He went vegan a couple years ago. He looks better than he's looked in many years. He feels better. And news commentators are commenting on how well he looks. And then we also have an awareness now about the environmental consequences of animal farming, how inefficient it is. To grow plant foods and eat them directly is a lot more sensible than to grow plants, feed them to animals, raise the animals, slaughter the animals, have to refrigerate the flesh, and then transport it and eat it. Makes a lot more sense. We could feed a lot more people eating plant foods directly. And I remember I was speaking to a group of dairy farmers one time and making the point that, when I speak to these industry groups, I try to find common ground. And so I usually start out by saying that we respect farmers. Farmers work very hard, and they feed the world. That's very noble work. But the key question is, what is the best way for farmers to feed the world, to provide wholesome food that is accessible and people can afford? And the factory farming people say the best way to feed the world is through industrial animal production. And I kept coming back with them saying, all the evidence is contrary to that. If we grew plants and ate them directly, would require a lot less water, a lot less land, a lot less fossil fuels, a lot less inputs.
But they don't
it's
want
much
that.
more efficient. All the research shows
they don't
that.
make the money.
And I finally said to these folks, because they kept coming back and saying, no, industrial animal farming is the way we can feed the world. And I said, where do you guys get your information about this industrial animal farming feeding the world? And they told me the name of the book. It was called Saving the Planet with Pesticides and Plastics. And that was really the name of the book. And they really believed it. So, the moral of that story is we can convince ourselves of all kinds of things. But we need to step back, look at the empirical evidence, and then make choices that make sense. Make choices that we can feel good about instead of saying, don't tell me, I don't want to know about the cruelty. Or instead of eating food that makes us sick. If you think about it, in our country today, we're eating food that's causing heart disease, cancer, diabetes, causing us to suffer and die much younger than we need to be dying. That's completely unreasonable, and it's illogical, and it's kind of crazy. But that is how we eat in this country. And at a point, when you get to a certain age, it becomes normal to go on heart medication. Yeah. But it doesn't have to be that way. That's the thing, and each of us can be examples of living healthy, living in a way that we can feel good about, that's compassionate, and that others, I think, will increasingly want to emulate. But we need to be understanding ambassadors for the animals and for this way of life. We need to recognize that not everybody's going to go vegan overnight. So one of Farm Sanctuary's organizational values is to speak to people where they are. And where a lot of people are now, where the mainstream is right now, is that most people think factory farming is bad. So we talk about how bad factory farming is, and most people agree with that. And then they start eating less meat. This is a general way things tend to change. And as they start eating less meat, they start trying different plant foods and saying, oh, that's good. I could eat that more often. And they start becoming comfortable with it. One of the big obstacles to change is the fear of failure. Sometimes people say, I want to go vegan, I just don't know how to do it. And so rather than even taking a step down that path, they say, oh, it's too hard, I could never do it. So that's where each of us, just by bringing a vegan item to a potluck, or having somebody over for a vegan meal, or bringing brownies to a vegan picnic, or whatever it is, or even veggie dogs, just showing people what is available makes it doable. And that's, I think, a big part of what we need to be trying to do these days. And I'm also very excited about a new campaign Farm Sanctuary is launching. It's our Compassionate Communities campaign. And we're going to be focusing on a number of important cities, including Chicago. Woo! And the idea is for citizens to be doing outreach in their communities to educate people about the animal farming business and how brutal and violent it is, to raise awareness about that, and then providing tools to eat more plant foods and move away from the typical meat-based, dairy-based, egg-based American diet. So that's going to be happening here in Chicago. I think in October, in fact, Nick, who is going to be heading up that campaign, is visiting Chicago. So please stay in touch with us. Please stay engaged. This is an ongoing effort. And the only way things will change is for people to be involved and to educate others and to do so in a way that is understanding. I've been doing this for a long time. I went vegan in 1985, co-founded Farm Sanctuary in 1986, and over the years I've done my fair bit of finger wagging. And I found that doesn't usually have the kind of result that we want to achieve. We try to walk shoulder to shoulder with people instead of confronting people and saying, that is cruel, that is wrong, stop doing it. We may believe that, but that approach usually doesn't result in people coming around very quickly. So finding common ground. People agree that farm animals should not be confined in cages and crates. That's common ground. You find that common ground, you work from there. People like good food. Show that there's good vegan food. Can work from there. And be there to answer questions in an understanding, patient way. So often we're asked, well, where do you get your protein? And to us who've heard this hundreds of times, it seems kind of like a dumb question. But it's actually a question people really have because they've been bombarded by this message, you need to get your protein. So where do you get your protein? I mean, that's a question people do ask. And you can get protein in vegetables, of course, tofu, soybeans, beans. So there's a lot of ways to get protein. So just answering it and providing people with this information is very helpful. And so it's just important to get to be patient and understanding, and a good example, a friendly supporter of any positive changes. Sometimes people ask me, how can you have done this for so long, seeing so many bad things for so many years? And my answer to that is, I focus on the good things. I focus on the positive stuff that's happening. If somebody says, I'm not eating veal anymore, I celebrate that, I support that, I say, right on. And then as time goes, when it's an opportunity, I'll talk about how the veal industry comes from the dairy industry. Continue moving folks down the path towards more compassionate living. And personally, I started trying to eat healthier. For years, I would eat sort of junky food. And I'm still not anywhere near perfect when it comes to eating good food. But I'm really making a conscious effort now to be a more health-oriented vegan, want to be an example that you can live well by eating plant foods, and that you can also do some things athletically. I ran my first marathon this last year, and I'm signed up for some more.
On my
and
head?
So that's another example of you can eat plant foods and you can do these other things. So I'm being more mindful of that as well, as a way to become a more impactful ambassador for this cause. So each of us are models of a certain way of life, and each of us can play a very positive role in demonstrating that this makes sense. And it's also important for us to be understanding that most people grow up in this country bombarded with messages that you need to get protein from animals. And it's going to take some relearning to understand that we don't need to get protein from animals. Also, we're bombarded with this message, you need to get calcium from cow's milk. That is also going to take some time for people to relearn. And each of us plays a role in that. So I guess I'll close with that. And again, thank you all so much for being here. Thank you, Nancy, for organizing this, Jill for organizing this, Brian for being here doing the music, all of you for being here and for caring, for being part of a movement to change the way society views and treats farm animals. I think we have a raffle that's going to be going on here now. But again, thank you all so much. Enjoy the great vegan food here from Native Foods and some others. And there's some gift baskets, and yay team. Thanks.